Dr. Stephanie C. Holmes, and I want to tell you about the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages. Also, maybe you've heard about us through NeuroDiverse Christian Couples. Recently, I was interviewed for a live streaming event, and I thought the questions were really great. And I thought, you know what, they were really great, succinct questions that maybe I can tell you a little bit more about me, tell you a little bit more about us, and why we do what we do. So the first question I was asked is, why even is there the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages? Why does it even exist? Well, it's separate from our coaching practice. Our coaching practice is at www.holmesasr.com. Our coaching practice is where we actually work with marriage and families who have a neurodiverse marriage, or I work with a neurodiverse family system. So that's the coaching practice. Well, what is the International Association of NeuroDiverse Christian Marriages? That is our training. That is our equipping space. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want our couples to know that there is hope for their future. And as we always say, you don't have to be alone on this journey. Many couples and families that have a family member or a marriage where someone's on the spectrum feel very isolated, and they feel like they don't have people they can talk to. How do we communicate about this? Who do we connect to? Where's our community, especially in the faith world? So there are many great organizations out there doing many good things in the world of autism. There have been organizations that have sprung up to really work with individuals, teenagers, young adults, and great training organizations to work with couples where faith is not a part of their relationship. However, people of faith like to work with people of faith. And people of faith, especially those who are in neurodiverse relationships, if they are also Christian, want to have a provider that is also a Christian. And sadly, there are just not very many people in this space. So we came up with the idea of the NeuroDiverse Christian Couple podcast, which you can listen to if you go to www.christianneurodiversemarriage.com, click listen now, and there's our podcast. The podcast is free, and it's going on around the world, which is wonderful. And so that's one way that you can get some training and understanding. But for those who are counselors, coaches, pastors, chaplains, if you really want to be equipped to be able to serve and minister to neurodiverse Christian couples who want their faith and the neurodiversity in their marriage to be addressed, we really want to invite you to be trained. Now, here's some questions that I'm often asked by colleagues or when I'm speaking or doing workshops. If I'm a PhD or I'm a licensed professional counselor, I can already diagnose autism. I already know how to use the DSM. Well, that is true. By being an LPC and by having a PhD in clinical psych, yes. However, many of us were not trained in how to do adult assessment for the spectrum. Many people who are trained, even who are an LPC or have a PhD, might not be best equipped even to assess children on the spectrum. So if you're thinking about adults on the spectrum, let's go back to the 1990s when the term Asperger's syndrome, or also high functioning autism, became part of the diagnostic lexicon. For people my age and older, it was for my age and younger, that was just coming out. So if you're older than I am and you learned on the DSM-2 or 3, then you would not have really been trained on Asperger's and high functioning autism. Now, of course, we don't use that terminology in the DSM-5. However, those who are my age and younger, this was just coming out. We really weren't receiving training in our master's and doctoral programs on really assessing adults on the spectrum. So yes, additional training should be sought with certified autism specialists or other training fields that will teach you how to differentiate because adults on the spectrum have different needs. It manifests differently. And if you go back to the research and criteria, the DSMs were originally normed on children and mainly boy children. So a lot of women are being missed on the spectrum. All right, so we go back to the 1990s, We used to say things like Asperger's and denoting low and high functioning. There was also a stigma that autism also had was related to cognition or impairment of cognition. And so we're really just now, in this last 10 years, really starting to understand neurodiversity. So with that in mind, my fellow clinicians and pastors and those who work with marriages, have you considered that the therapeutic approaches and modalities that you learned in your various schools of training probably made the assumption that both people in the marriage or who are sitting on your couch or in your office who are there for marriage counseling, more than likely what we were trained in our modalities and approaches assumed that both people were neurotypical or not autistic. All right, so and when we read a Christian counseling book, when we get a marriage handbook, when we are trained in marriage and family, again, the assumption is both people are neurotypical and both people have the same and essential, compatible, and similar communication skill sets. Right? So just already on that foundation, we have some difficulties if we're working with a neurodiverse couple where one or possibly both partners are on the spectrum. So that's why we have developed and founded the NeuroDiverse Christian Couples podcast and the International Association of Neurodiverse Christian Couples, because we want to invite especially our Christian clinicians and pastors, clergy, chaplains. We want you to know the nuances and challenges of a neurodiverse Christian couple, especially what they face daily in communication and connection. We want you to know better because we believe that you can do better. So we do define marriage as a covenant marriage defined biblically, and we are here to equip and train, and we want to serve and mentor you so that you can better understand neurodiversity and autism in marriage, so you can serve, support, counsel, treat, and minister effectively to our neurodiverse Christian couple. Many counselors are well-intended and maybe even have worked with young children in the autism spectrum. So maybe there is some autism awareness, but there really is a need to understand adult autism and neurodiversity and understand the complexities of marriage. So what we want to do, what we're hoping to do, is in the next 6 to 12 months, our goal is to write a book as a family, my 2 children and my husband and I, to write a book to talk about a neurodiverse family system, again, talking about autism, our journey, and our faith. Also, you probably heard me talk about the research that we've been doing on neurodiverse couples. We also want to get some research that is peer-reviewed and academically done concerning what's going on with neurodiverse couples, why it is so important to get trained. And we want you to hear from the couples themselves the experiences that they have had, especially with Christian counselors, coaches, chaplains, and pastors who have been very dismissive of their concerns, dismissive of autism, and simply doing well-intentioned things that have not only not been helpful, they've been harmful and even detrimental to the marriage and to the mental health of one or more people in the marriage union. And so we know that's not your intention. We know that a lot of it is a lack of education. So that's part of what we want to do. And we're working on writing our books, and we want to train you. So from our heart to yours, we really want to educate and equip. We want you to have effective strategies. We want you to help our neurodiverse couples be energized so they can run their race with endurance. We want marriage helpers to better understand autism in marriage and the family system if you're going to be able to serve them. The reason we got started in this field is simply lived experience, which many people who are in this field are. Our journey started back in the early 2000s when we were having a lot of difficulties and challenges with one of our children. And because she was female, it took almost 2 years of the diagnosis process to get her identified. So back in 2005, 2006, our oldest was identified with what was then called Asperger's syndrome, and later as a teen was reassessed and met the criteria for autism level 1. Our youngest daughter was diagnosed with what was then called PDD-NOS, was pervasive developmental disorders NOS. Now that used to be kind of a holder spot for autism. because she was developmentally delayed in many areas. But as she had further testing, her developmental delays were because of speech and hearing issues. And so she did not fit the criteria for autism spectrum, but later for ADD inattentive type. Then in 2019, my husband was identified on the autism spectrum as well. So we are a neurodiverse marriage and a neurodiverse family system. ADD does fall into the neurodiversity family. So our journey started because back in the early 2000s, there were very few people and providers, who could even identify her as a female. Then as we wanted to seek help for ourselves and so our families, there were not a lot of resources available. Now for me, I never had an intention and I never had an end goal of working with neurodiverse families and neurodiverse couples. Simply what it was trailblazing, pioneering, and simply trying to survive and figure out how for our family to reach their potential, for us to get out of surviving to thriving. So I was working as a licensed professional counselor at the time in the counseling field. And so I'm saying to you, not in judgment, but to say that through my own experience and going through counseling and my LPC, I was not trained. Now, because I had heard the word Asperger's, that probably helped me get my daughter diagnosed and assessed a little bit sooner. However, it didn't train me or prepare me to do anything to be able to help my daughter or help my family. So there were also very few resources back then, specifically on Asperger's. So that is the heart, and that's where we started, is lived experience. I did have training as a professional counselor, and then in the past few years, did my dissertation on autism and in the school system and got my doctorate of education. So my husband is a certified master life coach. He is full-time senior vice president of IT in his full-time job, but together we are ordained ministers, and we believe in marriage. We believe in our neurodiverse Christian couples. We want our neurodiverse Christian couples to have happy, fulfilled marriages, but it's very difficult and very challenging. And so there's so many out there. There's so many people in need and so few people who are out there doing this, combining their autism knowledge and faith experience. So through our lived experience and through our professional training, we want to help you. So we always remind you that, again, there's hope for the future. You're not alone in your journey. And that means for you too, professionals, if you want mentorship or if you want to take our courses, please go to www.christianneurodiversemarriage.com, courses for professionals. And if you're a couple watching this, as our podcast says, we have courses for you too. It's a little bit different. It's not as clinical speech. There are some courses available where you can hear from other neurodiverse couples. We talk about some things specifically that you need to know about as a faith provider. Sometimes if a restricted special interest is in the area of pornography or sex or religion or theology or the roles of men and women in marriage, these can be very difficult things in addition to the neurodiverse relationship. So again, thank you for joining me. I just wanted to share with you my heart, why it's so important to be educated, because we want you to be equipped to serve neurodiverse Christian couples well.